Yeah, I was just
But,
going to say it's all about AD data, which I think is a good
yeah.
point, just because we keep talking about this idea that there's one dashboard and that you can audience target it. But the biggest hurdle we see with most organizations is their Active Directory data just isn't clean enough to be able to build those groups.
Welcome, everyone. In this case, Greg, to today's Ask Some Practice. It's December the 14th, and we're going to get started on today's topic, which is business cases for Viva Connections. As always, we have our full component of team members today, and we'll move right along and talk about the agenda. So for business cases for Viva Connections, we're going to start off by talking about Viva Home as a starting place for your intranet. And I think Emily's going to lead us through some out-of-the-box dashboard capabilities, mobile first stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to then talk about some help desk scenarios to sort of exemplify load code versus pro code capabilities that can be the next steps in using Viva Home and how those business cases related to it. Then talk about some additional business cases, and Derek is going to lead us through all of that. So moving right along, I think we're at home. Emily.
So as was announced in September, Viva Connections is going to have a new capability, which is this idea of Viva Home. So Derek and I were part of VESA's keynote at the European SharePoint Conference, and that gave us a little preview of what Viva Home looks like. So we have some videos to share with you to talk through, since a lot of the content that's been shared thus far has just been these static images. So if we pop over to the next slide, we can see Viva Home in action. So you can see here it's accessible through Teams, and it's surfacing all of the different Viva modules that you are licensed for in your organization. It shows the Viva Connections dashboard and any of those cards that you put into that Viva Connections dashboard. We have a feed on the right of SharePoint News and Yammer conversations. And then at the bottom, we have frequent sites, followed sites, and navigation, which is connected to your SharePoint app bar. But please note, they call it resources. I think a better name for it would be navigation. So if you have that in your site, that gets a little confusing. Now, one of the big announcements is that you can go back and forth. So you can see here, I'm going back and forth in between a home site that we have connected called The Landing, and then going back to the Viva Connections home. So you do have the option to have both. If we take a peek at the next slide, we have some videos here. If you have not worked with the Viva Connections dashboard before, just want to demo a couple of the out-of-the-box cards. So the first one is web link. So here you can see we can use a medium or large card. We can add in a link internal to our environment or external. For this one, we're just going to do a simple little help desk example where we are linking to a SharePoint list. We can provide the card title and description, and then of course we can add imagery to that card as well to give it strong visual signifiers, and we can also audience target them. Another out-of-the-box card I'm a big fan of is assigned tasks, because you don't have to do anything to have this immediately provide value. It's going to actually roll up all of your tasks that you need to do across To-Do and Planner. So I think where Viva Connections is really successful, if we pop to the next slide, is this idea that with really minimal configuration, we can create a centralized location for content across your environment. Now, if you come to Ask Some Praxis a lot, you know we talk a lot about the maturity model and this idea of people going up to different levels. I think for organizations who have not yet really invested in their intranet, maybe you are a Teams first organization due to the pandemic, maybe you're just starting out your journey with Microsoft 365, maybe you just don't have the roles at your organization to support that communications, marketing, and branding lead to create that intranet central place yet. What Viva Home is really going to afford you is that roll up across all of these separate site collections, bringing all of that relevant information to you. It's also a really strong mobile first experience. So I think my take on Viva Home is that it's kind of a fancier version of that SharePoint start page, right? Because right now in the SharePoint start page, we have that roll up of news everywhere. We have those frequent and followed sites. And we, of course, have that SharePoint app bar navigation on the left. What Viva Home is really giving us is all of that information here within Teams where people are working. So out of the box, really short path to success for setting this up. But I think what's really more intriguing is how you can potentially extend this dashboard and make these custom solutions for your organization.
Right. So these Viva apps that are sort of rolling out as sort of in the business first sort of look of things is definitely giving people the peek into all of those. But I think it does get more powerful when we start to customize. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
About extending the dashboard. Derek, this is your bread and butter now. You're the expert on extending a dashboard.
Apparently I am. And so talking about the dashboard and extending it, it really, there's a few different moving parts. The first part is we leverage the adaptive card framework for the user interface. And if you've been in Teams and you've seen the little cards show up in there, some of the little cards show up inside your, inside your Power Apps and all those kinds of things. That's sort of
Outlook email.
Oh yeah,
When you
Outlook
see those little cards that are like, why is it doing this? And it's like, oh yes, your airline flight is these dates on the top of the email.
Yeah, those are all of the adaptive card framework. And what we're doing is we're taking that framework and bringing it into our extensibility model using SharePoint framework. And we do that because it allows us to create very easily cross-browser and cross-device functionality. So the whole intent, as Emily said, that this is mobile first. This is, you can use it on your Teams mobile device. You can use it on an iPhone. You can use it on an Android. You can use it on your desktop. And it works in SharePoint. In your SharePoint home site, it works on the Teams desktop, it works in the Teams mobile client. I put a star in your Teams mobile client because at the end of the day, some of the actions don't work so well, and it really varies depending on which device you're using and which actions you use. I skipped over the one part, which is, so we've used the adaptive card framework for the front end. If you want to use dynamic content, you want to read and write somewhere, you want to do something more than just display static data and link to other systems, you need to leverage the SharePoint framework. And once you start doing that, this sort of opens up the aperture to whatever it is that you want to do. And so here's some examples. Oh, Julie, did you?
No, I was just going to say the sky then becomes the limit for whatever you can build as a custom API that you can then access through that client side, what you can do client side, and then whatever you can build server side, cloud side to access and elevate the functionality that way too. So sky's the limit.
Exactly. So here's two examples. The one on the left is an Android phone. This is an example of what the dashboard for these adaptive card extensions is what they're called, what the Viva Connections dashboard looks like on a mobile device. And then we saw it in Emily's demo on the right-hand side. We've got the dashboard holding all the different cards that we have. And that is the same pretty much as you saw in Emily's demo, whether you're looking at it from inside Teams or inside just your SharePoint home site.
I think one of the things a little bit confusing about that dashboard is that dashboard on the home site is actually a web part that's surfacing a special type of page that lives in the Pages library, which is where you go to put the things you want on the dashboard. And I think that was definitely a disconnect at the beginning, like going, well, how do I get stuff in the dashboard? Oh, it's really surfacing this special page.
Yep. The other thing about that is that you can only have one dashboard. And the dashboard can only live in your SharePoint home site. So until we get multiple home sites, we can only have one dashboard across everything. And that's
audience target the cards though, right?
You can, yeah. So the way I would suggest to get around that would be to audience target the cards. So in this instance, and I'm going to show you the, well, actually, you can just go to the next, the next slide.
All right, let's do that.
So we wanted to focus really, we could talk about technology till the cows come home, but what we wanted to focus on, especially around this, is what's a use case? What is a practical application of this? And we created two adaptive card extensions that are on the dashboard. The first goal, and they're around a help desk. So the first is to allow users to quickly create help desk tickets from wherever. So you could be on your desktop, you could be on your phone, and use that ACE, that adaptive card, to come in and just enter in and create a new ticket. We wanted to be able to integrate it with a backend system. So in this instance, I connected it to a SharePoint list, but you could connect this to Jira, you could connect this to ServiceNow, anything with a web API that you can read and write into. The idea here was to allow, in addition to end users creating a ticket, create another adaptive card extension that would allow technicians to see their tickets. This would allow people in the field to see what their assignments are, report on them, update them, and even close their tickets. And as Julie was saying about audience targeting, one is specific to technicians, one is applicable to everybody. We'd want to audience target the My Tickets to only show for technicians, while the other one is shown to everybody.
Okay, next slide.
Yep. So we sort of took it from there. There is a no-code option with adaptive card extensions that Emily showed you, and that linked out to the help desk list or the help desk tool. There's a low-code option, which you can use the card designer. The card designer uses that adaptive card framework JSON to help create the visual layout for the ticket. You can add data, but at the end of the day, the data is still static. There's no dynamic sort of methodology there to get the data, and you could just copy data in from JSON if you wanted to. But what you can do with this card is you have the option to create a different user interface like you see here, and then also link out to a Teams app or any asset that's accessible by a URL. So if you have a Power App you want to link out to, if you have an external system, if you have a SaaS solution, you can just link users directly out to there. You can't use the low-code option if you need dynamic data or you want to do something with the data once you've got it. So this form, while technically you could put this form in the low-code solution, you couldn't do anything with the form data afterwards. So that low-code option is really just for visual updates and then linking folks to other places.
So the card designer is in the UI of the dashboard, yes, or is it at some other location? Yeah.
The card designer itself is a adaptive card extension in the dashboard web part that you can add, and then once you've added it, you can sort of configure it how you want. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do. Yep. But it is limited to being static data.
Yep.
Once you move into the pro code space, and this is using SharePoint framework, as Julie said, any system with a web API you can connect to, and that's it. You can connect to an Azure function that then goes off and does things, other server-based things, server-side things. You can incorporate dynamic data. You can read and write data from your system. You can constantly update it. You can put it on a refresh and have that work. And as I said, you can collect, store, and manipulate data, and also incorporate any kind of business logic that you need here. Next. And so here's an example of the help desk ticket. You can click on it. You can choose different categories. You can choose what the level of urgency is. You put a little description, and then you click the next button. The Wi-Fi is down. And so then you can add additional information here. There's also geolocation that you can do and the ability to add and remove images. So you can, in this instance, you can set the location, and then you can say, my building is building 3, and then somebody can put that in the ticket so that when they come visit you, they can see that and they can go directly to you. We can go to the next one. Here's an example of what that geolocation looks like. In the sample that I created, it actually takes the geolocation and then it uses a free Bing Maps API key that gets the actual street address as opposed to just the latitude and the longitude. And then it uploads all of that data to a SharePoint list in the back end.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So, wow, I went through that really quick. So,
well, I think one thing, Derek, that you and I have talked about a lot as we were going over this content, I know from my perspective of using out of the box, it took me a while to see what the value was in using the web URL card, for example, because when Viva Connections first launched and the dashboard was just visible in that SharePoint home site, and I had that card there, how is that so different than a quick link? But I think you made the point in your slide that these cards are actually appearing in a bunch of different places, and that user interface is so consistent across all those places. And at ESPC, Louisa said something that I really appreciated about us keeping these user interfaces consistent, because so often we're trying to educate the business about things like phishing and things not to click on. So having that nice integration of your custom content in your environment is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yep,
the other thing you could probably say is that not on a large scale, but one of the things we talk about with our clients a lot is the need for a centralized list of links. And so, there's code ways of centralizing links and surfacing them and throughout your organization that we do for our clients on a grander scale. But on a smaller scale, you can also probably use these cards for a few of the links that you might need to external systems, like if you use something like Workday, or there's a ticketing system, I can't think of the name of it, help desk ticketing system, I just can't think of the name of right now. ServiceNow. Yeah, those kinds of things where you can put the out of the box, just create a link dashboard card with a nice, image on it and whatever, and that can be a really easy way to surface those links throughout your system without having to build something.
Yeah, anywhere where you could, any of those HR things, Concur, Workday, quick, your time tracking software, like all of those are the kinds of things that you can put in your, in your adaptive cards. You could build out using the low code option. You could build out that list of links however you want, and then have it surfaced in that sort of low code option. You don't need pro code for that. You do if you want it to be dynamic and pull from like a SharePoint list or something. But you could do all of that through the adaptive card designer and the card designer. So I wanted to touch on additional business use cases. I'm happy to entertain questions. I see the chat's like sort of going through.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's all about AD data, which I think is a good point, just because we keep talking about this idea that there's one dashboard and that you can audience target it. But the biggest hurdle we see with most organizations is their Active Directory data just isn't clean enough to be able to build those groups.
That's been the situation since Mark and I first started working and Hyperfish got introduced into the world, and we went, oh my God, we need this. And, so.
Yeah, it's been the case since we started using Active Directory. I think the day after Active Directory was launched, all the data was wrong.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think that is the challenge, because when you're starting to talk about the dashboards, you can't, because there's only one, you can't pick and choose like different layouts. So if you've got 3 at the top, you're seeing those 3 at the top unless they're audience targeted.
Yeah.
Is there anything we could do with, I mean, you've still got with dynamic groups to fix that up?
Well, like if you wanted to do one based off of department, the departments would have to be right, so I guess that's where the disconnect is, I think, for most.
Yeah, so I think in a lot of organizations, Active Directory has sort of been a background thing. It's driven, who gets in a door or something, as opposed to something that's right in front of people's faces. And when you start putting things in front of people's faces like this, and you really need that data to be right, you have that motivation to start cleaning it up. But people don't like fighting that off. I mean, it tends to be seen as this insurmountable problem. And it's just data. data cleanup is a fact of life in most organizations, and you just have to have good data.
Todd, did you have a point? Oops,
sorry.
Somebody's talked.
Yeah. So I was going to say the data being wrong or right, and then Emily said if the department data is wrong, you can't do whatever. Louisa had a blog post, and those of you that were in some practice will appreciate this. Louisa posted a blog post a couple days ago about how to add custom properties to Azure AD. So she used the example of pronouns. So she added an Azure app registration, added a property called pronouns, and then showed how to filter all that up. So there is a way to extend Azure AD to put data in and then control. So if you're getting your department data out of Workday or something like that, and there's just no way to make it right, you could add an additional field, put somebody in charge who can make it right, and then put that in dashboards and search and all that.
Yep. Right. Don't fix the actual problem.
Well, sometimes you can't. I mean,
well,
yeah. Caleb, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to share that, you may have already talked about this. I'm kind of arriving late, but like Workday and PeopleSoft and those sorts of things can make the AD data a lot better, at least as long as your HR processes are getting people onboarded and put into the right areas. And the challenge we've seen is when you get out of your traditional verticals, like you want to be doing role-based groups rather than departmental groups or business unit groups or whatever. That's where big challenges come in, but maybe that's what you're already talking about.
Well, that I think Todd's point about custom data then becomes kind of interesting, because now you can use that if you can define a set of roles, a set of metadata around some things that you want to be able to audience target around. You can use those types of extensibility points to start doing that maybe. So that's that's certainly a valid point.
Yeah, and the post that I was going to post, the reason I mentioned that was funny for the Some Praxis folks is because I've been talking about writing that blog post for like a month, and then I saw that Louisa wrote it. But
well, you snooze, you lose, Todd.
But
it's really what that boils right down to.
Yeah. If I had the pink hair, maybe no. She helped me out because I had this
dragon.
she had this. I had this big bunch of stuff that I wanted to talk about, but she talked about 2/3 of it. So the third that I'm probably going to do. I get it right. So using that data, so Emily and I've done a bunch with dynamic groups, using that extensibility data that Louisa talked about how to build, my blog post now will be how to use that to build dynamic groups. So now you have better control over these dynamic groups, because we've got a customer that I've had to do that with.
Well, get on that then.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm stuck in this Aston Praxis.
I excuse you. Goodbye, Todd.
Bye.
You'll be seeing this post in the next hour. Derek, do you want to go through?
I will. Yeah. So we've talked about a bunch of this, but as Emily said, really at the beginning, it's supporting that mobile frontline worker. Because it's so mobile forward. It's really those quick hits and getting the users to their tasks immediately. Some of the other things that we came up with to be able to sort of leverage some of the other use cases we came up with, like leads, having the sales team manage their leads. If you're an individual salesperson and you've got 6 clients, or you've got 3 people that you need to follow up with today, you get to see that list. If you're going on site to do a visit or give them something, you can track that information, and it's all like really those quick tasks. Cases and claims and insurance, right? Like if you have an adjuster going out, they can fill out the form for the adjustment right then and there in that card, and have that submit back to whatever system it is that you're using, whether it's SharePoint or whether it's a proprietary system.
At least for a quick one too. Like I think maybe some people are going, oh, I don't know, those forms are really long and we have a lot of information to get. But sometimes it's about stubbing them, right? Like the basic required pieces of information, just so that you get it started, so that you can then use that as like a reminder that you have to sort of do the rest of this when you're back at a place with a larger monitor or whatever.
Absolutely. The other thing we were thinking about was shipping and logistics, right? If you're doing a packing thing, you can get a packing list and you can tap the items off once you put them in and click save and you're done. Event registrations, right? Like having somebody register for the charity walk you're doing. Inventory, if you work in retail or you need to know how many of a certain item you have in stock, being able to pull that up very quickly. As well as leveraging shifts, right? Like if you're a frontline worker working, the third shift, being able to trade out those sort of schedules. There are a lot of custom cards you can create. There are a few cards in the, from third-party providers as well. So if you are using a proprietary system, you can check to see if they already have a connector. You can also drive employee engagement through some of the other items. So managing profiles, checking pay slips. We talked about linking out to HR systems, giving praise to your colleagues. So doing that sort of employee recognition piece, as well as highlighting time off and company holidays. I worked with a client that was thinking about, they're a global organization. So you may be in the US and you want to know when the next US holiday is, but you work with the UK and you want to know, is it a bank holiday in the UK today? So that you know why you're not getting a response from them. So these are all those kinds of things that you can help facilitate and ease the friction in that business scenario.
Derek, didn't you write a whole bunch of samples of cards? Did we include that in the resources?
Julie, I did, but it's not in the resources.
Jeez, well, go find a link when we talk about this next slide and paste it in.
Yeah.
So we have some roadmap. Who's going to address the roadmap?
Emily is.
Okay. All right. So this was presented at ESPC, and just a couple of call outs that we've mentioned throughout this session. Nothing was newly announced. So these are all kind of from September and Ignite timeline. So this idea that multiple home sites are coming in the future, which will give us that opportunity to have multiple dashboards that Derek referenced. Unfortunately, I don't know why the Viva items aren't on the M365 roadmap. So the only detail we have truly is coming soon. But if you look up them individually, every single one of these items aren't actually there, which I've noticed across all the Viva modules, which is kind of interesting. The only other piece to call out is just this Viva Home that we demoed today. Is that out of the box zero configuration you saw? Really all that you're editing on that is any cards you want on the dashboard. You do have the option of which appears first, and they do have that PowerShell for you to switch it, whether you want it to be the Viva Home or that SharePoint Home site, which we demoed going back and forth in between.
Cool. All right, so we have some resources, and Derek's going to paste in the chat the one that he forgot. And then so to wrap up with just a few minutes left, we do have, we want to announce that December 28th, we're going to not do Ask and Praxis for the holidays. So that is a change. And for January 11th, we're going to do New Year's resolutions, News Year resolutions. I loved the pun. SharePoint News to improve your communications this year. Mark Cashman would be very proud of us. We do want to announce, sadly, that our colleague Mike will be leaving some praxis at the end of the year. Mike, did you want to say something, or are you just showing your pretty face for today?
You know that I'm more than just a pretty face, so and it's never offer an Irishman the microphone ever, right?
I left you 3 minutes for this very reason.
I wanted to thank all the folks on this call. Obviously, my colleagues at Simpraxis, who've made this a very special place to work, and are, I'll consider friends. I want to be FOS for a long, long time to come, friend of Simpraxis, but also the folks on the call, clients and community members and people we haven't even met in person, who let us into your office or your lunch hour or your life for an hour or so, or a half hour every 2 weeks. Like, it's meant a lot. It helped us get through COVID in ways that we couldn't have otherwise. So thank you to Simpraxis, and thank you to the Ask Simpraxis community. And you'll be seeing me. I'll be on these calls. I'll have a different logo behind me.
Sounds like a threat,
Lurking.
Mike. You'll be
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Lurking.
Like a bad penny.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We definitely, you will be a missed colleague, but hopefully you are on to brighter rainbows and new challenges. So good luck to you for sure. CS Live, we're going to be at the European Collaboration Summit in force, I believe, almost all of us will be at European Collaboration Summit, where Mark and Todd are going to Thrive. Todd, are you going to Thrive this year?
I did not submit for Thrive.
Oh, okay. So Mark is going to Thrive this year. And then again, we will be fairly in force at the 365 EduCon conference in DC in June. So this is all happening in May. So it's going to be a quiet spring-ish, winter spring for us, which is not a bad thing. I could use a little travel downtime. And as always, if you are a dev and are interested, I do the Cloud Dev Clarity video cast, we shall call it, with Andrew Connell. That's not on a regular cadence, but we do have a lot of videos already out there. So check us out if you are interested. And so with that, that is all we have for today. I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday. I hope that your holidays go safely and fun, and that we see you in the new year for our New Year's resolution on January 11th. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask and Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues. Join us again as we release new content every other Wednesday.